All right, everybody. So this is part two of the population PowerPoint lecture slides. So in this one, we're going to finish up population density and distribution, and we're going to kind of focus on these three. And then we'll do a brief thing on population pyramid, and that should wrap it up. All right. And so this first one that we're going to look at, and this is all about distribution and density again, looks at how those two things affect the political, economic, and social processes. All right. And so how does population density or distribution affect the politics of an area, the economics of an area, and the social processes like education and healthcare of an area? All right, and so when we take a look at this, let's take a look at some of the different things. And this is a very short list of what could be extensive, but just in general, okay, this is our ESPN analysis. So the economic, taking a look at this first one, so businesses earn more, obviously, when they're located near a large customer base. And so, if you go over here to this map of Arizona, if you're a business and you want to make a lot of money and have a lot of customers, then generally you're going to find areas that are more populated. And so obviously here's Phoenix and here's Tucson. Flagstaff is somewhere up in this area. I believe that's Flagstaff, that's Prescott, and I think this is Sedona. And so you're going to find businesses, obviously, and this is a no-brainer. Businesses are going to go where customers are. All right, and so that's one of the effects of distribution. The more people come into an area, the more businesses show up. Manufacturing plants also are going to look for areas with a high population because those manufacturing plants need a labor force, and the labor force is found most often in these higher population areas. All right. State legislatures also use distribution and density to define political maps. And so a political map might be something like a congressional district in Arizona. So just a real quick thing. In the United States, we have 435 congressional districts, and 435, yeah. And so we have 435 congressional districts, and so that's broken up per state. All right. And so Arizona has 10, I believe, no, 9, I believe now. And that'll probably go up because our population's going up. But here's the idea. Each representative is supposed to represent roughly the same number of people. And so right now, if you take the population of the U.S. and then divide it by 435, you end up with somewhere around 730,000 people. And so in general, and it's not exactly this number, but in general, each representative in the House of Representatives represents somewhere around 730,000 people. All righty. And so we'll take a look here in just a second at Arizona's political map. And so the idea of density, as certain areas get bigger, they might require more representation in Congress. All right. Urban districts. So urban districts are the cities, are usually smaller than rural districts. And so, if we take a look at Tucson, which is here, here's the rural area. And so it's a lot bigger. All these areas without a lot of people are a lot bigger. But, this is where the population is. All right. And so when you look at things like schools and police and other services like that, you're going to find them concentrated in these areas, and it's going to be much more sparse in the other areas. All right, so take a look at the congressional map for Arizona. And so you can see, so each one of these supposedly, well, not supposedly, each one of these represents roughly the same number of people. All right, so there's a district. This whole thing is a district here. All right, and so that should tell you that the population density is very low per square mile here because the area is so big. So that would be a low population density. But then we get into something like this one. Here's the 9th, I think that's the 9th district. And so that would indicate that, this is about 730,000 people. This is about 730,000 people. So you're going to have a lot of representatives here in the area of Phoenix. Tucson is actually cut in half, so we're about here. Half the city is in District 2 and half the city is in District 3. And so that's why you don't see, one specific two within that tight area. So anyway, so this is a congressional district map. And again, this is based on distribution and density throughout the state of Arizona. And one of the things I want you to think about is, as more people are moving to the Sun Belt, we talked about that, but as more people move to Arizona, is that going to have an influence on our political power in the country? And the answer is yes, because if we keep getting more population, let's say people come from Michigan, down to Arizona because they like the weather better. They haven't been here in July, obviously, but they like the weather better here. And so more people come from Michigan to here. So Michigan might end up losing a congressional seat, and Arizona might pick up a congressional seat because that population has shifted and that distribution has shifted to different parts of the country. And so that's why it's important. And so when you look at Arizona today, we have seen an increase in people moving into the state, and it's changed our politics. We are much more of what they call a purple state, meaning we're generally now half Republican and generally half Democrat. Just for generalization purposes, we're a toss-up state. So we could go either way right now, Democrat or Republican in the next presidential election. So the increase in distribution and density within Arizona has had a big impact on our political standing. So let's take a look at some of the effects on the environment and natural resources, because obviously if we start to load a bunch of people into a certain area, that's going to put pressure on those two things. All right, and so one of the concerns that we would have would be this thing called overpopulation. And we're going to watch a video at some point that looks at those. In the 60s, they talked about a population bomb. They thought that this was going to be a terrible thing for the planet, and they were wrong. But if overpopulation can be an issue in certain areas because you might get too many people in an area and the land can't support it. All right. And so when we talk about the land being able to support it, that gets us to the second term called carrying capacity. And that is, how many people can the land that you're on support? All right. And so we're here in Tucson, we're at about 1 million people. And so we have to start to look at things like water. How many people can be supported by the water resources we have in Tucson? And so that would be our biggest limiting factor, because food, really, we can import pretty much everything if we wanted. We can grow stuff here, but generally the carrying capacity, the biggest concern in Arizona, in a desert area, would be what's the carrying capacity in terms of water. All right, so cities can be built on low carrying capacities because we can import things, but most of them are built on areas that had a great carrying capacity because that's where they started before the industrialization boom, and so they put themselves on these places with a high carrying capacity, and those cities have just grown. All right, now think about something like Las Vegas. That would be different. That would fit this one. We can locate places with a very low carrying capacity and have it work. And again, someplace like Las Vegas, their biggest concern would be water, obviously. Can they sustain what they have given their water resources? And so we also look at effects on pollution, the effects of pollution and the depletion of resources. How much are we using up? And so, here's a couple of pictures of waterways near highly populated areas. All right, and so this would be runoff. And so, the water in these, and these are extreme examples, most rivers don't look like this, but, definitely some do. And so, these kinds of resources are the things that we would need to protect, because this would be the drinking water for people. And so if this starts to happen, then you risk that resource. All righty, here's another one. Okay, and then the last bit on this is looking at the effects of distribution on infrastructure, density and distribution on infrastructure. And so infrastructure is, if you're not familiar with the term, it's just all of the stuff that's built that makes society run. All right, and so think about, roads and bridges are always the terms that you hear when we talk about infrastructure, but it's roads and bridges and airports and hospitals and electric grids and water systems, and just all those things that make a city go. All right, and so obviously if we have a high density area in a city, we're going to need more robust infrastructure. All right, and so we also get things, when you can group everybody into a certain area, into an urban area, we start to see the beneficial effects of like sanitation projects, things like that. So here's some examples of infrastructure that would be needed in more urban areas. These would be high-rise apartments, because if the city's already full land-wise, you just have to start building up. And so that would be part of the infrastructure. Here we have a rail system would be part of an infrastructure, power grid, airport, hospital, roads. You get the idea of infrastructure. So if people want to live in these urban areas, then that's going to drive up the population density, and that's going to increase the demand. So it's going to increase the demand for infrastructure projects. All right, so here we have high density housing, single versus single family homes. Let's see. Take a look at this one in Chicago. Here's just a quick example. They have a section of Chicago called the Loop, where they have a population density of 21,000 people per square mile. This says Orlando has an estimated population density of 2,300. To give you a better perspective, in Tucson, we're at about 2,200 people per square mile. And so, this is this area of the Loop of Chicago, is bigger than us by almost a factor of 10. And so this is what it looks like. This is what the Loop looks like. And notice they've had to go up. And so these would be a mixture of office buildings and apartment buildings. And so, this is what happens when people want to live in a certain area. All right, and so over here you can see this would kind of be the outline of the Loop. All righty, and then it all kind of spreads out from there. Here's some of the infrastructure. Again, this would be, laying water pipes, things like that, trash service, police and fire. And again, these things, maybe not the water pipe, but depends on the city that you live in, if the city does the water versus a private company. But the taxpayers end up paying for this. So if you live in the city, and I think this is actually a Tucson picture, but if you live in the city, they say, we're going to make you pay your taxes, and with those taxes, we're going to use that for trash pickup. And the idea is that if they didn't, and they left it up to the individuals to dispose of their garbage, that would be a very big problem for the city in general, because not everybody would dispose of it. And so a number of problems would arise from that. We also make people pay for police and fire protection. You don't want, if your house is on fire, you don't want to call up a company and say, hey, my house is on fire. And then they say, okay, let's negotiate a price. All right. And so things like that. And there was an old philosopher who kind of made a joke about that. But anyway, that's why they have the taxes. They just force you to buy the services. They're services that you may or may not need at some point, the trash service, but it's services that are beneficial for society as a whole. All righty. Let's see. So now we get to population pyramids and population composition. So obviously when we, not pyramids, but when we put people into big groups, sometimes people either self-associate or there's a forced association that can be caused for negative reasons. So we'll take a look at that. So think about some of the bigger cities like New York or Chicago or San Francisco. You might see something like Chinatown or Little Havana or something like that. And so ethnic groups might tend to cluster amongst themselves. Historically, if you look at U.S. cities and where African Americans live, those tend to be clustered. But when we look at, you did the redlining article, you can see that sometimes those clusters are forced through discrimination. So here's just a couple of pictures of where ethnic groups have decided to come and generally live in the same areas. All right. Here's redlining in North America. And so this would say, look, here's, different parts of this map are where we're going to segregate people in terms of lending money to buy a home. All right. And so if we look at the scale of analysis, this can also have an impact. So scale of analysis, if we look at where African Americans live in the U.S., it's primarily in the Southeast. But if we go up to certain areas, so here's Chicago, again, this would be, a more local scale of analysis, then we can start to see different patterns emerge. And we've done scale of analysis a decent amount. And so that the closer in you get, the better the picture of what you're studying is. All right. This is distribution of nation's Hispanic population in the U.S. And again, this is more clustered, all right, in the South and Southwest. Just another picture of Chinatown. So take a look at this last one. So different places have different clusters based on age, and maybe also on sex. And so in 2013, so Utah, they had their average age was 29.9. The median age in Maine was 43 and a half. And so some states are older and some are younger. And within the state, again, that scales of analysis thing, if you look at Tucson, our median age here is 33. And up in Prescott, which is northern part of Arizona, it's a smaller town, but the median age is 50, almost 57. And so, again, certain areas attract certain groups. Now, part of this median age being lower in Tucson could be part that the university is here, and thousands of young people come into this city every year for college. So, but also, if we look at males versus females, it could be an effect of war, migration, government policies. If it is skewed, if an area is skewed more towards male than females, there might be jobs there that are traditionally men's jobs, and so there's different things that could account for it. And so one of our jobs is to figure out what those things might be. Why are there differences outside of what we would typically expect? All right. And so population pyramids, I think we can go relatively quickly through this because we've already looked at them a bit. I don't want to play that. It breaks populations down into cohorts. Oh, Lord, sorry about that. Just a sec. Make sure I'm still sharing what I want to be. All right, so it breaks populations down into what we call a cohort, and these cohorts are, 5 years. Every 5 years is a cohort. And so you can see this is a population pyramid for the country of Niger. And so real quick, just this country, the pronunciation is Niger and not Niger, because Niger used to be a French colony. Right below Niger is Nigeria, which was a British colony. And so the British would pronounce it Nigeria. The French would pronounce it close to Niger. So anyway, just so you know. All right, so we've got the population pyramid here, and again, it breaks it down by age groups, and so these are all the different cohorts, and then on the bottom, this will either tell us in terms of population, so this is female population in millions, or it might give us a percent, either one. All right, and so we have females are going to be on the right, males are going to be on the left, and so this is how Niger breaks down. All right. And so a couple of different trends, there's different trends that we can look at and start to get a picture of what the country might be like. And so if we have a wide base at the bottom, all right, so very wide base at the bottom, and then it gets very narrow at the top, that indicates that the country is in a growth trend, all right? It just continues to grow. So in Niger, we can see that it's generally balanced. Males and females are generally balanced, but again, once we get up into this age group, for most countries, there will be more females than males because females live longer. All right. And so what we want to do when we analyze one of these population pyramids is, look for changes. So any kind of bulge that kind of pokes out farther than we would have expected, or any kind of indentations. And so the job that we would have is what caused those changes. All right. So we might see something like war, natural disaster, epidemics, could be a government policy, whatever it is. But we can first see if there is a change that might not be expected, and then start to try to ask why. All right. So the impact of war, obviously, the clearest impact is death, and mostly we're looking at fighting age people, ages 18 to 40. And so if we look at population pyramids of countries that have had prolonged wars, we're going to see a drop in that age group. All right. Men and women are usually separated, delay having children during wartime, which leads us to a birth deficit, meaning we might see a drop in those bars on the population pyramid. Economic crisis could also cause this. During the Great Depression in the U.S., we saw birth rates drop. And so, any kind of sudden shift in, and again, there's a lot of different reasons, but so take a look at this is the German population pyramid in 1946. So just so you know, that World War II ended in 1945, and so this is kind of taking a snapshot. And so if we look at this, a couple of things stand out. It's obviously we had general relative growth here, and then we have a big contraction here. And so take a look at the age groups of these big contractions. And so, over here on the male side, it's a lot smaller than over on the female, and those would be all the soldiers that died during the war. And so this would, going into the war, we might start, or during the economic crisis, because the Great Depression was global, we might start to see this shift in, and then the war happens, and that might cause this. Then the war is over, and that might cause this. And so we have a kind of a big shot there, and then we might start to see it down here, and we'll talk about what that is in just a second. So the birth deficit, again, you can see here, this is, if this is for 1946, this is the age during the war. And so we see a pretty big drop there. All right. The U.S. population pyramid, this is in 1950. All right. And so notice we had a definite pyramid going here. And then around here's when the Great Depression hit and World War II. So those dovetailed each other. First came the Great Depression, then World War II. And so you see this incline, the economic crisis, and then the Second World War. All right. Now, when the soldiers got back, notice what happened here. This is what they call this is the beginning of what they call the baby boom. All right, this is after the war. Life returned somewhat to normal, and a lot more children were born. So that's 1950. All right. So a couple things. I mentioned this earlier. You can't have things called a baby boom. The end of a war or the end of an economic crisis or the end of some big event could cause a baby boom. The baby boom in the U.S. lasted from 1946 to 1965. All right, and so these people that were born this year are now starting to hit 65, 66. All right, to just kind of give you an estimate. Baby busts, again, are when there's a decrease due to, could be war, could be economic crisis again. And then we have this thing called an echo. And an echo is if we have a baby boom, then once those babies are of childbearing age, then they may, they're going to have a fair number of children as well. And so you'd see large bars for the baby boom, then we see a smaller gap, the baby bust, and then we see a bigger one because those baby boomers are now having babies. All right. So again, if you take a look at the U.S., here's 1980 and 2015. So 1980, here's our baby boomers. All right. And so this baby boom group goes over here with the passage of time. And notice this group here is the echo. All right, so this is the boom, and this is the echo. And so now we start to see this downward trend. All righty. We'll skip that video. This is the global population pyramid by year. So 1950, we definitely looked more like a pyramid. And so you can see by year what's happening. 1990, here's the prediction for 2100. And so it goes from being a pyramid more to a column. All right. And we'll talk more about why that would be. All right. So if we look at significant differences between cohorts, we want to figure out, again, what may have happened. All right, and so just here's a few things that might cause some of those changes. So if we have longer bars, and when I say bars, I'm talking about these, all right? And so if we have longer bars here, like this one, we want to figure out what might cause that. And so here's a couple of possible reasons. Small city includes a large university. So if we have a big bar of 18 to 25-year-olds, we would say what's causing that, and it could be a university. Clemson, South Carolina is a very small town, but it's got a university that has somewhere around 30,000 people there, I think. So that would, their population pyramid's going to have that big bulge in the 18 to 25-year-old group. Could be a shortage of school funding. So people might say, look, I've got smaller kids, so I want to move away because the schools here aren't any good. And so that would cause that age group under the 18 to 25, the children age group to be a lot smaller. Longer bars for ages 25 to 50 could be economic crisis, cause people to have fewer children, government policy to slow down the population. So if you look at something like China and their population pyramid, or some kind of epidemic, high infant mortality rate could cause that to happen. A couple more longer bars for people over the age of 65. You know, if you look at a place like Florida, a lot of old people are generally attracted to Florida because of the weather, and so their population pyramid might be kind of heavily weighted on that 65 and older, and then taper in. But you know, and so again, all we're trying to do is figure out why those differences exist. All right, come up with some plausible explanations, and then you can research it. You know, longer bars for males and females. Again, you know, if there's jobs that are more traditionally male, jobs that males do traditionally, then you might see something like that. All right. Let's see. And so this is an example of it. This is the United Arab Emirates from 2019. So last year, you know, this is an odd looking population pyramid. And so what might cause something like that? We're going to look at that in class. And then the last thing, and this should take me just about 3 minutes, is something called the dependency ratio. And the dependency ratio says, look, we've got the working age population, which is 15 to 64. And so based on that, how many people are over that age and how many people are under that age? And those, because we would call those people dependent on the working age group. All right. And so the dependency population, or I'm sorry, the dependency ratio says, let's take a look, let's add the people that are under 15 and the percentage of people that are over 60, well, 65 and over, or over 64, and then divide that by the working age. So these are the people that work, and these would be the dependents. So under 15 and over 64, and so these are the dependents up here. These are the workers down here, we'll say. And so we get this ratio, so 0.52 in the US. This just means that for every one person in the US of working age, they support an additional 0.52 people. All right. And so that's generally true for most developed countries. It's in that range, right? Now, for somebody like Niger, if you remember, their population pyramid was very, very wide at the bottom. We've got under 50, the age group under 15 is 49.3%. So almost half their population is under the age of 15. Now, they're 15 to 64-year-old, 48.1, and then only 2.6 over 64. So if we take these two dependent groups divided by the working age population, this means that for every one person in Niger, they have to support an additional 1.08 people. They have to support those people. All right. And so let's see. Interpreting the dependency ratio, so we can kind of take a look. So if we, again, dependency ratio says people 65 or older. So I think that's there. So it would be this group. And this is Japan, not Japan. This is Nigeria. And so the dependency ratio would be that group plus everybody under 15. So that group. All right. So dependency ratio would take these two groups, and this is the working age population. All right. And so this group, this percentage plus this percentage divided by the working age percentage. And so this would be a pretty high dependency ratio, you would imagine. If we come over here, you know, if we lop off this group and this group, you know, add these two together, that's our dependent group, and divide that by the percentage of population in this area, because that's our working group. All right, here's the age dependency ratio. So you can see, remember, the US was about 0.52, and so you can see a lot of countries are at this color. All right, people with, in the African countries, they have a higher growth rate, and so more people under the age of 15. And so you'd start to expect that. So anyway, this is another piece of information that we can use to try to get some, to analyze different countries. Alrighty, and this is Japan. We'll look at this in our class as well. And this is India versus China. And again, we will look at this in class as well. All right, so that's it. Hope you guys have a great day, and we will see you soon.